What's up? It's Tommy Green. You're listening to the Rev Talks podcast, brought to you by theREVgatherings, digital tribe of up-and-comers, emerging leaders, doing our best to keep in step as the face of the church changes in our generation. If this is your first time checking out the podcast, welcome home. If you are a returning visitor, hiya. Feel free to subscribe, share it around, give us a 5-star review. Tell somebody. If you like what you hear, please let us know. You can reach out to us at theREVgatherings.com. Feel free to email us at theREVgatherings@gmail.com. Hope you enjoy the episode. See you on the other side.
My face feature on.
No, you're not.
So
We're recording. Hi.
Hi.
Okay, welcome, Johnny G.
Bienvenidos.
Yo. Yeah. Sorry.
Welcome to the Rev Talks podcast.
Hey, wake up. Wake up.
Wake up, people. Wake up. It's time for the world to wake up. It's fine. I mean, I'm sure for like people in comas, very true. Anyone napping and late for work, true, even though no one's going to work, but like if you are late for work, you should wake up.
General Rev Talks warning. Please stop putting wake up at the top of every single one of your posts.
I mean, it's fine if you're like, I'd like to inform you about something. I'd like to offer a thesis. I would like to, wait, what is it? Like, I forgot there's a word. I wanted to Gary at something. I don't think that's the right word. I wanted to ponder a thesis. Hypothesize.
Propose? I'd like to
Propose.
Let me propose something to you. And what did you call it? The creepy DP Reddit? It's
I'd like to posture a consideration. Posit. That's the word I was looking for.
That's what it is. Posit.
Gosh,
man. Okay. Jeez.
So isn't I'm really warm right now. All right, let's do this. We're here.
Well, okay, so heavy crap, man. So you just went through personal loss in your family. Today is Chrissy Green's mom's anniversary of her rebirthday. She passed away a year ago.
Has it been a year?
A year, dude. So wild. So she would do banana splits for breakfast from time to time. So the kids did banana splits for breakfast today, and then
I do banana splits for breakfast from time to time.
All the time.
The explanation for that is differently painful. Sorry, that's an inappropriately timed joke.
No, it's dude. Is there?
Chrissy Green's family is fantastic. Can we just talk about that for 2 seconds?
That's real.
That little family is just dreamy.
Yeah, man. When I first met him, I remember telling them I had chosen sort of out of so many different parts of my own family that I remember. I think someone in their family. I did a wedding for someone in their family. It ended up just not being a good deal for them, and within a year or so, they ended up separating. And I remember the feeling was this was a really painful thing. It was a big deal. It was a big deal to get married. It was a big deal for me to perform the ceremony. And then I remember feeling like there was a failure in the relationship, and it was a big blowout. It was not cool. And I remember the way that everyone received each other, and I just remember thinking you can make mistakes in a family, and you don't just have to leave. That's wild. And my mindset was so black and white, kind of orphaned, and so weird that in the hardcore scene and my kind of gang mentality, I'd chosen into family in some ways, but didn't really know how to do family very well. And my own family had its own stuff. So I remember thinking they were a really cool version of family. It was the first time I was whoa, you guys are really family. That's wild. What is that like? And so, yes, the dreams. So they did good. They did a Zoom call today. I came back from a tattoo appointment. Chrissy was on with her sisters and her dad, and they're just chopping it up and stuff like that. So kind of a heavy day. And then my homie Matt got this amazing tattoo for my little brother.
Really?
Yeah, it's like from the Frank McCourt book. Have you ever read Angela's Ashes? Anyways,
I mean,
it's all
I saw the made for TV movie back in the day. It was well, but I think it was a required reading.
it was heavy. It's heavy. It's Ireland, and so
Yeah.
it's like one of Connor's. He liked McCourt anyway, and so just this powerful thing. And so Matt got it tattooed on the back of his head, and it's this quote from the book, and it's insane. I'll send it to you as I'm talking to you, just so you can see it, because it's striking anyway, because it's so dope. I put it on my story, even though it wasn't even my story. I was like, oh my God. But it basically says, it's this quote from the thing. It says, you might be poor, your shoes might be broken, but your mind is a palace. And that's like, this impoverished, like Irish kind of story, but it's this beautiful, like, harp. It's got my brother's initials at the bottom and some clovers and stuff. And it's on the back of my dude Matt's head. And I was so like, I was leaving a tattoo appointment on my leg, driving back home, and then knew that the tattoo shop was on the way. So I literally like veered off to like get there to see if I could grab Matt and my homie Jake that did the tattoo. And I missed, I walked to the door, got my mask and my glasses on, and I'm like, so I look like out of control. But I walk up, I got to knock because it's only appointments, everything's shut down. And Jake comes to the door. I like grew up with him. I've known him since I'm 18, right? So like we've been friends for a long time. So he opens the door and I'm like, hey man, is Matt here? And he goes, no. And I take my glass off and I'm like, dude, I just wanted to say thank you so much. And I just lose it. I like start literally collapsing in on myself. And my mask is like,
oh, that happened to me this weekend. It was a total like flutter face kind of moment where you can just feel it because you're trying not to cry and sob, and then it's like, yes.
It was just like, and I'm like, it was such a good thing, dude. And my brother would have loved, and Jake like loved my brother, and so he's just like, bro, and he's like, dude, it was really good, man. He's like, it's okay, and I'm like, okay, I just wanted to let you know, like, it really meant a lot, and I'm like losing it slowly. So it's been a while. So heavy day, it's a thing. Let's bring it current. So, that's a thing. That was crazy. But I was conscious of the fact that, like, it's like trying not to laugh at a funeral or trying not to fart in church or whatever that is. It's like, it's so inappropriate because I'm in my dude's work.
You're just like,
having this like very deep experience. And I'm like, this is borderline inappropriate. I got to get out of here like right now. So I messaged him when I got back in my car. I'm like, bro, I'm so sorry. Like, thank you for holding space for me.
And I apologize.
So he's like, dude, don't apologize, man. That was a tough one to do, and it was good. Your brother would have been stoked. So that was good. So heavy days all around. I know in the midst of everything. Yo, did California just get shut down again?
Sort of. I mean,
what's it like? It's like
that thing where like, people have very different experiences of the shutdown. Which is always really interesting. Like I'm totally a both and person. So for me, I'm like, I am not in other people's brains and I do not process. Like, it is one thing for me, like education. I've been working in education. It's the weirdest thing. Now, for me, I substitute teach because I'm non-committal and it's the gig I'm in. But I substitute teach, and it's harder for me because there are no jobs. But like, education is one of those things that is one of those like industries that is one necessary in an interesting way, so that like even teachers and stuff, if they're not in school, it all maintains the same movement. Like, work stays the same. It just happens differently. So it's not the same as if you're in other industries that are like massively affected by not being able to be in space and not being able to open up. So like, that's a really complicated thing. I mean, it's that the only time it felt like lockdown for me was in those first few weeks. That like, Friday the 13th situation for those, that last half of March was a little wild. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I would say here, it's that thing where I feel for for me, I don't know, it's weird. I don't look at now, maybe because I know a ton of doctors and a ton of nurses, like I've never looked, and one of my best friends was like he has a PhD in public health and like some other stuff. So it's like, I don't know if I've ever looked at this in a political way in that way, but I do understand like in California, it's a little bit like interesting as the politicians are kind of like bouncing back and forth, or like, open a church again. And then it's like, you should have just shut the church instead of just be like, don't sing. You're like, that's a stupid way to do that. More than it is like, I'm like, we're not persecuted. I know people will hate that, but I'm like, I'm like, churches that are on top of things have not missed a beat. But like, it's really interesting to see like you're like, that's a dumb way to do that. The answer is, I don't want to be the politician that's scared that like is responsible for people getting this sickness. So I'm going to just reshut things down, and my bad. You know what I mean? Like, I misread that and I really should not have. Or you just say like, hey, if the Lord is worth the coronavirus, then go to town. You know what I mean? So it's I don't know. It's interesting. I don't feel particularly locked down. Like, I've never felt particularly like stuck. It is very weird to be in a city like Los Angeles, where it is a city that is so alive, to go to this like weird, like, it feels like we're limping more than it feels like we're locked down. You know what I mean? Like, I don't feel like I'm in prison. Even this week I've been with family after a family death, and that was probably the most I've worn my mask those 10 days than I've worn in the entire 4 months. And so it's interesting. But I mean, it's really complicated, this whole like balance between how you look at various data, between like the two sides of this it's more like a dice than it is a coin. You know what I mean? It's like,
that's what I'm saying.
It's very interesting.
I'm like, everyone's like two sides of the same coin. I'm like, no, with a lot of this stuff, it's like, it ain't a coin.
No, and
There's not way more. It's a Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, it's a Rubik's Cube for sure. Because you sit there, you're like, you're trying to manage this public health thing, and I'm like, I'm sure no politician wants to be that person that's like, don't pin this mess on me. Like, this is not my biology that I created. Like, I barely can read. I did not, like, I got elected on accident. I don't know how we got here. So the managing the public health concerns versus the economics, where you're like, you just sit there and you're like, I'm not that smart with numbers for sure. Like, I did trigonometry senior year. There was no high level math here. But like, you sit there and I listen to enough NPR to know that the economy is struggle bus. And so you just sit there and you're like, well, I would not want to be managing these two very different, but like oddly tied together like things. It's like your crazy family member, like opening a credit card in your name and then maxing it out. You're like, wait, this was never supposed to be something I did. So that's kind of like, so it's super complicated. I mean, so in short, like, I don't feel so locked down, but it does feel like Los Angeles is limping for sure. You're sitting,
okay, so then what? Okay, so for the people, well, okay, so talk a little bit about, I don't know. I'm just like the church stuff, like.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the church thing I've realized is like,
what's the opportunity that the Church of LA has right now? Hey, if you can't get together and you can't sing and you can't be doing stuff that's going to spread your breath all over an enclosed space, what is the opportunity that you see for Christians right now?
I'll say this, like, because I think when it comes to, I'm going to try and manage that lightly, because I think there's a level of perception difference. Like, there's a level for me personally where I'm like, I have at no time perceived any of this experience in that space of loss of rights or personal freedom. And I think I was interested in
it like, no, I'm literally just trying to keep everybody healthy. And if we have to scale it back, I get it, totally, because there's a massive health problem right now.
And I have the privilege of, in my like community and circle, I know a lot of doctors and I know a lot of nurses, and I know that all of them were terrified of this. Like, one of my best friends is an ENT specialist on the East Coast. And when they took him off specialty surgeries and like brought him into like hospital care and like patient care in the height of it, like we had a Marco Polo going, and he was terrified. And like, my cousin is a doctor up in the Bay Area in a Kaiser Permanente, which is a regional facility, very intense. So it's like, so for me, I've had enough perspective where I never looked at it in a political space. But there are people that feel that in a very real sense, and I just feel like it's inappropriate for me to like say it's anti that.
You don't get.
I would say like, I think the opportunity of the church and I also met a church right now that has really thrived in the online space. Like their team have worked so hard to like create community and consistent experience that like we haven't missed a beat, and we've grown, and we've actually like are in our best place that we've ever been. So it's really interesting. I would say the opportunity is, I think it's this, I don't know, we're called to bring hope. You know, I think I had a better call at one point. I think I had a better thought a few minutes ago. But like, I do think we're like,
I think
we
you were
are
talking.
called to bring hope.
We were talking last week, and you talked a little bit about a corporate call versus an individual one, a corporate meaning versus an individual meaning. And so maybe just do that. Like corporately, what do you think we have the opportunity to do or to reform or whatever in a way that you feel like is really life-giving and brings hope? And then personally, as people, what do you think the opportunity is?
I mean, I've always had one of my one of my heroes in life is one of the senior pastors at our church in Jen Toledo, and she's always said, like, you know, there's man's way, and then there's God's way, and that God always has a solution. He's always got a plan. He's always got something in action. And I've always felt like, you know, let's say the craziest fantasy is real, right? Of like Christian oppression. Like we talk about the persecuted church around the world. Everyone's youth group had missions week where we understood that there are people that are doing church in the underground, that like the experience of worship is just the experience of presence adjacent to another believer. You know what I mean? Like, and we can't always do more. And so I would say, even if let's say we like present the fantasy and the idea of like worst case scenario that this country churns into this crazy space of like anti-Christianity and we're all driven underground. The reality is like the truth of the gospel is as powerful as it was in the greatest fantasy of freedom. And the power of the gospel and the power of the Holy Spirit is as powerful as it is, you know, when it fell on the disciples in the upper room. You know what I mean? And I just feel like we are never at a loss as Christians. And all of the evils that we struggle with, whether it's trafficking, whether it's abortion, whether it's purity or marriage or poverty, or even like care for immigrant people, you know, it's like there are always solutions that like there are always heavenly solutions that are like do not need like the approval of a system to work. And so I think the opportunity of the church right now is definitely to be more creative than the experience. So like, so if we look at, like in the prophetic, sometimes we talk about like you flip things to the positive, like you prophesy over someone. If you see something negative and scary, don't prophesy someone's sin or prophesy someone's like darkness to them. Prophesy this like opposite, positive, wholly empowered, wholly restored version, right? So it's like, if I see caution tape, I say like, I'm going to pray wisdom. I'm going to pray power, and I'm going to pray like a sense of self and identity and value and like strength of your own person. And I think the same thing goes with how we look at the church's opportunity. So it's like, no matter what's ahead of you, like if all we do is speak to what feels like attack, we're never going to eclipse it. So if we want to talk about the idea of persecution, the reality is like the only thing you're going to live as is a persecuted Christian. Your whole experience is going to be defined by that. But if you say like,
I guess that's the juice for a lot of people, right? Is like, who's responsible, who to blame, where's the fight?
And I think that's where you're going to feel no answer will be satisfying to that reality. Like, I remember we've talked about this before, like our church did a conversation even about abortion one time, and it was like a panel, and everyone was like showing up expecting this like tit for tat debate. And the reality is the people on all four sides ended up speaking in total agreement throughout the whole time, because all they did was offer solutions. So it was like, we know who's at risk. We know where this happens. We know who is the most susceptible to looking at this as a viable answer to promote stability in their lives. And here are the 5 things we can do to actually heal this and restore this that doesn't require like political action. You know what I mean? It doesn't require debate on a public scale. It just is like people mobilizing. And I think like the church, if the church is a church of restoration, hope, peace, and justice, we need to look at every area in the world and every area of humanity that needs justice with a massively creative lens, that is like unconcerned with the like legalities and political structures that maybe inhibit it. And I think the reality is most of those solutions don't require political action to see growth strength.
And
to see
most of those, I think it's like kids that go to business college and they go, why would I go to college for business if I'm an entrepreneur? They're basically writing and reading books about stuff that entrepreneurs did 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I think sometimes if we're going to be more creative, more hopeful, more creative than the experience itself, we're going to actually create our way through and out of the struggle bus. Most of the systems aren't going to catch up until it's already gained traction.
Well,
so
most of those, that's the miracle of like spirit inspired creativity. Is the reality is that it doesn't require convincing. You know what I mean? Like most of these
the miracle of spirit inspired creativity.
So like if you're a justice person and you're pursuing God for like something, you know, to like a way to act, most of the time the things that come up and the things that come through for people who are real innovative and really pursuing God in it, they're not polarizing solutions.
No, people go like, this makes sense.
Oh yeah, that works. Like even even out of that thing, like my church has this really interesting opportunity where they're working to reform foster care in Los Angeles, because one of the main things that like a significant thing of need is that if like the data was if every church in America supported and rallied together to support a family to foster 1 to 2 kids, we would clear the foster system in the United States.
But it's so cumbersome to do it.
That it's like there's binders and binders and binders of forms. So what is people in our church doing is like they're working with the main organization systems in Los Angeles to reform it. And the reality is like, you know, and then you take it. So if you follow the rabbit trail of it, it's like if foster care becomes something that isn't horror story filled, but really enriched, and then the church has been like, you have a generation of churches that like really committed to foster care and like empowered, protected families for kids. Like if a parent wanted to opt to carry to term and offer their kid and give up their kid to the adoption program or the foster program, there isn't fear of that. There isn't a long-lasting trauma that they feel like they're signing their kid up for. And that's just like one component of it. So I feel like with most of these things, like I think churches like our church, you know, or just I've seen a number of churches double down on the online stuff. And, you know, so I think there are ways to be more powerful than the circumstances at hand. And I think if we just kind of, I don't know, if we get hung up on some of these nuances, like we become unempowered. We become inability.
I guess that's what I'm seeing is I'm watching people like, here's a real interaction. I'm just going to read this to you because I think in general, this is where I go like, this is, it feels like the base level of interactions that I'm watching with people look a lot like survival. So, here's the post. Friend of mine whose mom passed away a couple years ago posts because we did a walk. I got invited by my friends are these business owners here. They're working with the local Salt Lake City BLM people. And there was there was a police shooting and the DA didn't bring any charges. And so it turned really nasty in the last couple of weeks. So there was a demonstration on Sunday and it was a walk. And my homies that put it together reached out to me on Instagram and were like, would you come? And I'm like, sure. So I went to this walk. And, you know, it's family. They got music playing. You dance in the intersections. They're blocking the street. You know, it's just like a thing. Got a little hairy one time. That was it. But the post was, my friend posted this. Her mom passed away a while ago. So she posts the article that the newspaper did. And someone in her family says, I don't go along with this and neither would your mom.
Called my mom.
Called the mom thing. Pulled the mom card. And my friend, who's just so awesome, I understand you and I are on opposite sides of this. I have been very respectful to you and not respond to anything that you post that I may disagree with. I would never post on your page the things that I feel my mom would or would not disagree with out of respect for her and you. I would expect the same in return. I'm sad that this comment came through Facebook rather than a phone call or in person. And I'm hurt that you'd throw your perspective of what you think my mom would want. What my mom would want is for us to not have this discussion on Facebook and to love each other unconditionally through this time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, ooh, that is like the best version of survival. That's what I feel like. That's the healthiest version of a very low level of interaction and conversation. I don't like the fact that disempowered people aren't even having fully connected conversations through social media. There's a better way to do this.
Yeah.
Then we think, and even if you just don't lose the relationship through stuff like that, that's not empowered or creative in solving problems. That's not even looking at it like you could even see it in any kind of way that goes, how would you do this then? Yeah. So I just like the idea. I was overcome by the fact that this person responded with so much grace, expressed what really happened. I'm angry that this happened and I'm sad that this happened. Also, you need to talk to me about it. And we're not doing this here.
Right.
I think we need to have a whole lot more of that happening anyway. But then when I think of like empowered people becoming powerful, becoming more powerful than the circumstances through creativity, through like really awesome ideation of what's possible if we all did this together. So much better than let's fight each other over who's responsible, who to blame, what the problem is, blah, blah, blah. It's not solution oriented at all. So to be more creative than the experience is to literally reorient our brain around what kind of heavenly solutions could be possible. And if they're good, the crowd will literally go, oh, that's good.
Yeah.
But if we're just fighting, kick each other in the balls, like nothing is going to happen. So
totally. Yeah. And I think you know, and maybe, you know, there's real world implications in terms of like, you know, the political world is not a pastoral world, you know what I mean? So you're looking at a really weird dichotomy of stuff. We put a lot of expectation and, but yeah, I just think like, you know, the other side of it is also like, I think you and we didn't grow up in the church in the same spaces that other people did. So there are certain like worldviews and realities that people are living out of that like are completely like, I can't identify with them in the slightest. So some of these ideas that people are perceiving as, you know, attacks or limitations or abuses of power against the church and things like that. Like I have never had any experience with even that worldview outside of this time. So there's a part of me that struggles a little bit because I'm like, I really don't know where to meet you on that because like I haven't experienced it in this way. I don't perceive it in this way. We are having two fundamentally different experiences that like I cannot understand what your conversation is. But I do say like I mean, you know, like, but I do think we also have to take stock of in that same way our own worldview. Like one of my best friends, Noel, like is one of my favorite people on the planet. I don't respect him. I don't respect anybody on the planet very much as much as maybe I respect him as a person. And like I grew up in Los Angeles, 150 different cultures and communities, like massive like experiences, like global, like just world. You can live 5 minutes away from someone else and have a completely different experience of Los Angeles. And like, so I've lived that. And he lived in a smaller kind of like town in Minnesota, called it Flyover Central, or like, you know, but to understand too that like there's certain perspectives and perceptions and assumptions that I make as a person in Los Angeles that fundamentally, as many worldviews as I can understand, will not take into consideration small town, farm town, will not take into consideration, like it just, there are, my worldview is fundamentally limited even in the global diverse perspective I grew up in. And so, and for him, so just that mutuality of understanding, but I think taking into account of your worldview really helps you understand, like, what am I saying? Like one of my best friends, one of my favorite people from college, we lost a little track, but we just recently connected, and she works for a national governmental law enforcement agency and has worked like a ton in trafficking and has worked a ton in trafficking, both of like art and things like that, but also human trafficking.
Yeah.
And, you know, in the post, this like movement of like new resurgence of like Black Lives Matter protests and things like that.
Sure.
we share very different views of what this is. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, sure, totally.
And I look, and one of the things that and at first I was frustrated, but I was honestly, I had to like take a step back, because what she started to post was even some positive moments of like, kind of, she can post some of the stuff that feels like, it's a little bit more like, like this tit for tat type of like left or versus right, kind of stuff. But then she started posting things that were like very positive interactions and times when the law enforcement officers really came through and really like succeeded and really like cared for the community and saved a life. And, there's a part of me that like, as much as like, I think for people who are in like the Black Lives Matter world aren't 100% F12, they're aren't 100% like anti the police.
There's a whole lot of, I felt like that's some of the discussion.
And that's a complicated space. But I remember I just had to feel like, I personally don't like, even in any kind of like hesitancy I have to trust certain law enforcement spaces, like there's a part of me that like, I had to empathize in deep and real ways, because I love her as a person, and I've loved her since freshman year of college. And I just think she's the best person ever. But like that to legitimize and humanize and care for the humanity of law enforcement officers, like there's just a thing where I was like, I have to respect this in a very real way, and I have to hold on to this and make space for this 100%. You know what I mean? And so I think there's that challenge where it's the both of like really double check our own experiences and our own worldviews and lived experiences, at the same time staying true to our value system, but also realizing like, especially as the church and individually, we have real opportunity to like to bridge these middle spaces. And I'm a total both and person. Like I would always consider myself more left of center than I am left than I am right. It's like the both and I think is where there's health. And I think, that's the intercessory place too as a church, is like the both and the more centrist kind of lived experience where we use the best elements of both perspectives to like really bring change. Like that requires the intercessory space, because people want to polarize and we don't necessarily have to. It feels like in most of these circumstances, and this is maybe my idealistic, optimistic self speaking, but like there are elements of the both and that like if we could, imaginary world, if we could blend those together, I think we would all end up where we want to be. And that's a really hard world. So it becomes the private, personal, the churches, the individuals, our own nonprofits, the spaces that we're in, where we try and develop and build those things and the things that we're called to. But I also think not everyone, second tangent on that, is not everyone can do it all at once. So it's like, there's a certain thing where like I care, let's say it's abortion, let's say it's sex trafficking. And like, there's a lot of things that go viral or whatever that are big deals. There's a ton of like trafficking of human life and sex trafficking in the various forms is a massive problem that lies just underneath the surface of the human experience that we all live in. Yeah. 90% of us are probably never going to do anything with trafficking, and that's okay. It's okay to feel strongly about it, but like most of us will do nothing about it. And there's a complicated space. Like, so for the handful of people in your life that will do something about it, care for them. You know what I mean? Like, or you look at like, it's really hard to do these big, deep things. It's really hard to hold space for all of it, even if they're all noble. And I think it's like, give us grace. Like let yourself off the hook for that, but also the holding expectations of people to care for things that like it's a noble thing to care about abortion if you're an abortion person. But if you do nothing about it, like I'm not going to call you out on your hypocrisy of it. You know what I mean? Or like, or I have to choose not to. Like I've been in the church for 15, 20 years, and I have yet to meet a single leader in a religious space ever in my entire life who's done anything about abortion. I've never met him. I don't know where those people are. I'm sure they're out there. I know that there's organizations that do advocacy and stuff, but I've never met someone doing grassroots or making any efforts for it. And so it's a really interesting thing where like, for a long time I was mad about it. And I think in this last few months and couple of years, I've had to realize like, maybe I consider what I can do if I care about it, or just realize like, it's a complicated thing to change, to create a space that culturally is like negates it. But I think that's why these creative endeavor, like being creative, pursuing God for creative ideas on how to alleviate, like if you care about foster care, you also are, it's like if you reform foster care, you're making a safer place for kids in foster care, but secondarily, you're promoting the like lessening of abortion. You know what I mean? Or something like that. Or like, or you're promoting the lessening of trafficking. Or if you are a very like, if you're a very generous company, you're promoting like anti-poverty realities. You know what I mean? If like,
Totally.
if you're a church that chooses to hire like a couple social workers instead of paying like $300,000 on like a Christmas concert, you know what I mean? You are like, because I've been to big ass churches that like do spend all this money on these like Easter and Christmas services. And like, you could hire 10 social workers that will change your region. You know what I mean? It's like, there are solutions that simultaneously like fix and heal some of these big issues that like you don't realize how massive that is. And I think that's the opportunity of the church. And the 45 minutes later, I think that's the opportunity of the church in this season, is to be more creative and be less like victimized. You know, I mean, we've never been victimized. We've already been given the fullness of restoration, healing, hope, and power. You know what I mean? So like, I'm not a victim, you know, and I don't, and that's not like the demeaning version of victim mentality, which I think is weaponized, and I'm not gonna. I'll pull that back a little bit, but I do think.
I like the expression though, where you're like, hey man, do you realize how much we've been given just in Christ alone to live? Where are we victimized again? Where have we lost our power to choose?
And that's maybe the page of the actually persecuted church that we need to take a little page from, is like, the reality is like, you've got a world of people that are fundamentally like our friends in Dubai, like they fundamentally cannot meet in a very first world, very empowered place where the government has formerly been super for their church in Dubai, and they're struggling. You know, there's this like weird, they've been driven underground in some really weird ways. And we haven't touched base in a minute, but like there is that thing where it's like in an actually persecuted space, like there is a level of empowerment and a level of optimism and a level of like, whatever, let's pivot and figure it out. That why dwell on what's dark? Because they knew it from the start. And I think there's that space that we get to live in as believers, where like we can, like, the power of the gospel and the power of the cross is to be undeterred by the complications of our human experience. And we are a lot more powerful than that. So
come on. Okay, well, Joni G, A, I love you. 2, you're super smart. D, I get a kick out of you. And that's a lot for me to think about now. So I'm frustrated. I'm joking. I'm not frustrated at all. The power of the cross. I like the idea of the both and I think that can be really helpful for people to be able to regard one another's human experience, to be able to regard one another's emotions, to be able to listen, and for people to at least feel heard. Yeah. To feel heard on either side, so that I saw a dude at the protest. He was like the main guy, and he said, this is going to take a lot of the change governmentally or even accountability wise or whatever it is that all of us are kind of dealing with. How do we relate to power? Who does power protect? Who does power speak for? You know, as all these things are sort of being put back on the table, he said, this is not a moment. This is a movement. And I think it's like, if we're talking ship, you have to be sort of moving in order to turn any direction. Yeah. And so if we can give ourselves time to move, then as it's moving, we can figure this out. I think as a national community, as an international community, we can figure out what's going on, which is hopeful.
And I do think there's an element too of like thinking about what's actually happening versus maybe what's conceptually happening.
Yeah, what could happen.
And I think a lot of people and I think there's an economy of the conceptual in public thought, in building your own brand online. Like there's a lot, like it's why I didn't grow up watching like political pundits, you know what I mean? But now, now that I've like, let's say, I mean, I watch CNN, let's say for CNN in specific, right? Like I watched that when it was just news, and then I've watched it over the years. Like I didn't know that 24-hour news cycle was a thing. And I realized like when I first started watching CNN was probably the beginning of 24-hour news cycle type of TV. But I've also watched it slip into that biased space. And my brothers and I, we joke, you know, oh, we think You think CNN likes Trump? You know what I mean? Because there's some stuff that gets said where you're just like, okay, you know what I mean? Like, okay, that's wild. But noted, you know what I mean? But I think the understanding of like, sometimes you have to understand bias and what you listen to, understanding like that. Like, yeah, if I watch CNN or if my parents, like my mom, sweet, bless her heart, love her to death, start watching MSNBC, and it's like, that's wild. It's very decidedly, their perspective is very decided. And so it's like, you have to watch an hour of Friends if you're going to watch this show tonight, or like pundits are really hard because it's like, it drives a hypothetical understanding isn't always accurate to what's actually happening. And I look at, so things like, let's say even like the church, it's like, yes, there are certain limitations to the church right now, but what's actually not happening is driving the church underground. You know what I mean? And we see it, and maybe there's some people that, and granted, this is a perspective thing too, whereas like, I don't look at it like we're teetering and slippery sliding into this like darkness, but some people really do see that way. So that's the thing.
True.
But like, what is actually happening? What are we actually seeing? So like, let's say like the defund the police thing, it's a bold statement to make. And when you research it, it's more like a differently fund the police. But the rallying cry is defund the police, which is problematic for the people it's problematic for. And it's hard. It's like it's not safe. And it doesn't feel great for the people it doesn't feel great for. And I think for in the way that, but so there's that thing where you're like, you have to kind of like take the time to like, critically assess the conversation that's actually happening, what's actually practical, what's realistically maybe something we would experience down the road from these things. And so then in that practical reality, what can I do to be a part of it? Or what do I need? What am I actually worried about? Because I think there's a lot of people that are worried about things that aren't real. So it's like, we're not, so how do you process that, and how do you like make space for that and understand things accurately? And I think that's just, it's a work. And especially if you, for the thing that feels so wild that it's causing you to lose sleep, Google it, research it, double check it, see what's actually at play, and see what people are actually wanting. You know what I mean? Like, and there's just certain things where like, I've realized some of the things that I feel I have a balanced perspective for, some people will never feel comfortable with, and that's just fine. And that's just how it goes. But I do want to, I would say challenge the church and challenge everyone to be like, there's an the reality is that we're often given a worst case scenario, and we often, some of the louder, more like aggressive voices we listen to are going to like posit a very like pessimistic view of what could possibly happen. And it's probably not what's going to happen. But the reality is like, how do you chill yourself out, and how do you try and understand it for what you can actually verify versus, what holes only get filled in by what we can imagine. And there's a lot of things where we fill holes that are only what we can imagine. And that's never going to be,
Well, I think too, just even for the creativity of like people, I think I would say this, and then we'll bring it in for a landing, is like, when I would say this, when I realized in my own world, in my own interior life, in my soul, that I was having like a significant problem, and I went to counseling, there was a moment in that experience where my therapist basically said, you're going to get your core identity from somewhere. And if that somewhere is possible in your lifetime, sit with that and get a clear vision of, and it was about my father, my earthly dad. And he said, sit and ask this question of your dad. How do you actually feel about me? Because we didn't have connection, we were estranged, and our relationship sucked. I had all these gaps in who I thought he thought I was. It was hard for me as a young him to see where I was in the world. I had gaps. And so I'm trying to fill the gaps the best I can, absent from the person that gave me my name. And so I would say for Christians in a crazy time, when you realize that you're having a problem processing the world, that we're actually like we're designed to get our identity from the Father. And I don't know what that language does for everybody that's in process, but I would just say on a soul level, if we're not listening to or listening for the voice of peace from God, we're screwed. We're just gonna be caught up in this other side. So that's what it says, like, the opportunity for the church is to get these amazing, creative, powerful, empowered options to actually, what did you said such cool stuff. Be more creative than this experience, or be solution focused, become more powerful than the circumstances. For me, I can really only access that when my inner self is actually at peace. If my mind and my soul is in conflict, my creativity drops. So I just feel like for most people, like, if we are actually listening for the voice of love or for the voice of peace, like in a spiritual way, and we're moving from chaos to chaos to chaos, and then we're surprised that everything sucks and we suck and it's all going down, yeah, that's like really good addition. That actually makes sense. But I think my challenge for individual people would be like, stop with the bullshit. Just stop. Get with God. I would say it like this, in deference to Connor Green: be quiet and listen. Then you can move. Like, but that's where I feel like for Chris and me, especially in the last week, we've just taken time every day to just be quiet and listen and try to reorient ourselves around a God and a God history, a God journey that in recent years has felt very lonely and very hurt and very sharp. So now it's chaos. Now we have to draw close to the cactus and we don't know how. So I just feel like in general, it's like, yeah, I would say for me, maybe for a lot of people, like, you have to get back to peace. And I believe with all my heart that God is good. And in the presence of God is that peace, is the ability to reignite creativity, reignite hope in a way that you don't have it when you're in pain and under pressure. Maybe you can create to a point when your back is against the wall. You can innovate out of a situation, but that's like high-level survival. That's not like beauty. And I think there's a beauty part of God that can give us strategy that makes the world beautiful, that isn't just like fighting our way through this. And I guess I just wonder about that, like the creativity part, to be more creative than the experience, not to outsmart it, but to actually create something brand new. I think that comes from a really miraculous place. Yeah. And I'm distant from it until I get in the presence of God. Whatever that looks like right now, which is just sitting, it looks like right now, sitting on my porch for 10 minutes with Chris, trying to listen to some Christian thing, like just being quiet in the presence of, but it's 10 minutes, man, in the midst of all the other stuff. So I would just say for people, I'm like, man, I think the invitation I think my brother was here, he would say, yeah, everyone needs to shut up and listen. But I think that's really hard.
Oh yeah.
Because I go, yeah, like all of this creativity comes from a heart at peace. So I feel like the invitation for individual people that are going to follow Christ is, you need to spend time with peace until you feel it, and then see what happens. But that's also tricky, it's counterintuitive. So,
and if you feel like you need to act. It's just like, no, be measured, be calculated, be thoughtful, be able to define and defend why you're doing what you're doing. Yeah. And really know your purpose, and also be really focused. There's some people that like, I don't need to act. They might feel like in the time of the Rona, I don't need to act. You know what I mean? And there's some people that are going to feel like they do. And there's a point where like, you have to bite it off and you have to pursue it. Like, all systemic change happens incrementally, and it happens in just like incremental spaces and adjustments. And I think sometimes for most people, the idealistic, the hopeful, the empowered reality that we hope to live in can be achieved but just within what's arm's reach. You know what I mean? Like, we can only sometimes, all we can affect is the like spaces directly around us, and let that like, and just take this like butterfly effect fantasy and like as like an intercessory fantasy, and just say like, I will create a safe space and let that safe space like inspire a million others. And that's just like, that's the like the humble like perspective of like humanity and how this works, and like what the church can really do. And even like the like evangelical gospel, like the idea of like, you know, you sometimes you save souls one like safe moment at a time, you know what I mean? And like, and that's kind of like, it's not necessarily a salvation that's needed with a like Romans road moment, you know what I mean, $1 million question moment. It's sometimes it's just like he was so safe, they were so safe, that family was so beautiful to us, that church was so great to us. Like maybe my expression and experience of faith doesn't look the same, but for sure it's there now. Like it heals, like most people just need a little light switch experience of their faith, and all of a sudden it's like there. So, and that just comes from like safety and compassion and empathy and justice, you know. And
turn that up. That's it.
Yeah, and Jesus is like Jesus of the simple and the straightforward and the pragmatic and the right in front of us. And so there's a part of that I think like we have to like hold on to and really fight for.
Yeah. That's sick. Yeah, I agree. Okay, as we end here, questions or comments for Johnny or me, email us, theREVgatherings@gmail.com.
Yeah.
I'll set up like a thing for the Rev Talks, and that way we can do stuff. But I'm going to need you to curate it because I'm not doing that at all. So
we can do that. You just holler. Just let me know. Send me the password.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So yeah, there you go.
Where you get your 6 fade. That's like
Also,
that yoga mobile.
Dude, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna send all these episodes to the homie that's doing some of the sound stuff. I think is down to do some of the sound stuff. He hasn't done it yet, but we'll see how it can do. But I may have you read advertisements, and we might have to do a different, because I just did one that was like, thanks so much for listening to this episode. But I think you and me need to do one, and so that will be fun. But anyways,
it's really where I thrive.
All right, then. Well, hey, to everybody that listened to this episode, thanks so much for checking it out. Me and Johnny G, love you guys a lot. Hit us up with questions and comments, and we will see you next time.
Yeah, love you guys.
Hey, you guys. Tommy Green here. Just want to say thank you again for listening to this episode of the Rev Talks podcast. Our hope with each and every episode is that it would encourage you, maybe give you a reason to have a laugh, expand your capacity on the inside to love and empathy, appreciation, hopefully make your world just a little bit bigger, and give you faith, hope for the future. If you like what you heard, again, please share, subscribe, give us a good rating, give us some good feedback. Over all of this, thank you so much for taking us with you in a small part of your day, on the drive, on the run, just as you're going about your day. Thank you so much for sharing some time of your life with us on this podcast. To connect with us, you can email us again at theREVgatherings.com, and we will see you on the next episode. Love you guys. Bye.